Let me tell you something strange about people who always feel older than their actual age. We live in a world where youth is endlessly celebrated. Impulsive plans, late nights, loud laughter, aspirations untouched by setbacks. But somewhere, mixed in with all that excitement, there are people who are completely different. They're still young, 22 or 25, but they carry within them the quiet of a soul that has gone through many seasons of wind. They observe deeply, they think more than they speak, and they experience life with an emotional depth that few their age ever touch. Maybe you know someone like that. Maybe you are that person. And here's the question that often lingers in your mind, or in the minds of those who look at you. Why? Why does someone so young feel like they've lived a few extra decades? Why does a soul in its 20s feel as weary as one in its 40s? It's easy to assume you're too sensitive, too thoughtful, or simply just different. But that's not the whole story. Beneath the surface, there's a deep psychological structure at work. One that says a lot about experience, about how you see life, about the things you had to carry too early, and about a quiet maturity that goes beyond what age can measure. You see, no one naturally becomes mature beyond their years. No one steps into their 20s already carrying the calm, the understanding, and the weariness as if they've lived a few extra decades. People who always feel older than their age often share one thing that few notice. They had to grow up faster than everyone around them. Sometimes so fast they didn't even realize what they lost along the way. Their childhood didn't unfold at a natural pace. It was stretched, pushed, forced to mature ahead of schedule. While other kids were laughing loudly over little things, they were watching the adults' eyes to guess how the atmosphere might shift. While others were allowed to make mistakes, they had to be careful with every step, every word, knowing that one small error could make everything chaotic. While friends could express emotions freely, they learned to hold back so as not to bother anyone. While others received unconditional love, they became the ones providing stability for others. These were the kids who became little adults, not because they wanted to, but because circumstances forced them. Psychology calls this phenomenon parentification, or childhood adultification. When a child is placed in the role of an adult, having to care for, shoulder, and endure, instead of being protected. This doesn't just take away innocence, it shapes their entire inner structure later on. How they think, how they love, how they worry, how they always feel. Different from their peers, those kids grow up with the sense that they have to be strong, calm, and know how to handle everything. And when someone has to act like an adult too soon, they carry emotional scars that others don't see. They enter adulthood with a 30-year-old heart and a 40-year-old soul, despite being only in their 20s. Their maturity doesn't come from rich experiences, but from years of surviving in their own home. The silent conversations, the fear of predicting every change, the times they held back tears to not mess things up. All of it builds an invisible burden, and that very burden ages them from the inside. Always vigilant, always defensive, always thinking more than feeling. They're no longer children, but they haven't had time to be adults either. Just a soul forced to be strong too early, carrying the weariness of things no child should have to go through. And from that childhood, forced to grow up, something else begins to form inside them. A quiet calm. But this isn't the natural composure of someone born gentle, nor is it the more mature than peers trait that others praise. This calm is a form of armor forged in an environment where any displayed emotion could lead to hurt. When a child realizes their crying isn't comforted, but only annoys others, they learn to stay silent. When they see their sadness or anger can make the atmosphere tense, they learn to hide it. When they understand their weakness isn't protected, they learn to be strong. And so, silence becomes their main language for survival. People who feel older than their age often share the same defense mechanism. They cause little trouble, reveal little, always keep themselves fine. Even when they're not, they become considerate, controlled, knowing when to stay quiet, knowing how to please others, knowing how to maintain harmony in the family or group. Not because they want to, but because that's the only way they learn to be safe. Psychology calls this emotional suppression, holding back feelings as a survival strategy. And when suppression becomes a habit, they develop another layer, stoicism as survival, strength, not from maturity, but from having no choice but to be strong. A child forced to be quiet, to keep things stable, grows into an adult who always has to be stable, to not bother anyone. And when you have to be fine for so many years, aging in the soul is just a natural consequence. Early maturity means carrying an adult mindset from a very young age, having to observe, analyze, anticipate every situation, understand others before they say anything. They're used to monitoring themselves in every word and action, because one wrong reaction could make someone angry, sad, or disappointed. And this constant self-control tires their mind and ages it early. Living in prolonged emotional vigilance teaches the nervous system that safety lies in silence, in stability, in shrinking oneself. They gradually take on the appearance of someone mature, quiet, reserved, always in control. Not because they were born that way, but because that calm was the only armor that ever protected them. And beneath that peaceful shell is a soul that grew too fast, endured too much, and learned to stay silent to survive. That silence becomes their armor, and from within that armor, another trait gradually forms, hypersensitivity, that often even they don't understand why they feel so much. People who feel older than their age often carry a special kind of finesse. They are hyper-empathic, with the ability to empathize so strongly they can read others' emotions from a glance, a heavy breath, or the slightest change in tone. They notice when someone is sad, even if the smile is still on their face. They sense tension in the room before anyone knows something's wrong. They know who's hurting, even when that person tries to hide it. This isn't a mystical ability. It's the result of years living in a state of observation for survival. When a child is forced to constantly monitor adults' emotions to know when it's safe or dangerous, their nervous system develops heightened sensitivity. As adults, that sharpness turns them into people who read others much faster than their age. But no gift is free. High EQ means their mind has to receive, analyze, and process too many emotional signals every day. A normal conversation with others might just be a conversation, but for them it's a complex web of moods, subtext, energy, triggered memories, and unspoken things. Their brain works like a radar, always on, always receiving, always analyzing. Because they process more layers of emotion than the average person, they easily fall into burnout, a subtle form of emotional exhaustion that outsiders often don't see. They burn out not from doing too much, but from feeling too much. A careless word can stick in their mind all day. A slight shift in someone's attitude can make them wonder dozens of times if they did something wrong. They walk into conversations, meals, or social events and come out feeling like they've been on a long journey. Not because the encounter was special, but because they felt too much, understood too much, adjusted too much throughout. For them, a normal day can drain energy, like a stressful day for others. Neuroscience explains this through mirror neurons. In hyper-empathic people, mirror neurons tend to fire more strongly, making them feel as if they're living the other person's experience. That means when they see someone sad, their body reacts as if they're sad. When they see someone stressed, their heart rate rises. When they see someone hurt, they carry part of that hurt. In this context, feeling I've lived too much is not an exaggeration. Their brain really is going through too many emotional peaks at once. When emotions go deeper than natural, it consumes more neural energy. And when that happens every day for years, that sensitivity becomes a form of psychological aging. They age not from time, but from the intensity of emotions they have to process far beyond their age. A 20-year-old lives with a mind processing emotions like a 40-year-old. A 25-year-old carries empathy that many don't reach until middle age. Sensitivity makes them refined and profound, but it also makes them tired, lonely, and always having to recover emotionally after experiences others see as normal. And it's the combination of strong empathy, high energy cost, and prolonged overload that pushes them into the state of older than their age. Even when their body is still young, that sensitivity opens another layer in their inner world. They don't just feel deeply, they think far ahead. People who always feel older than their age often have a type of thinking that should only appear in later stages of life. Thinking about the long-term future, about life's purpose, about the finiteness of human existence. While peers are immersed in enjoying the present, they're already wondering, where will I be in 10 years? Am I living true to my values? If life is so short, am I wasting it? These questions aren't pessimism, they're how their brain works. A combination of emotional depth and the ability to analyze experiences from a long-term perspective. They see consequences before actions happen. They see the big picture in the smallest details. They understand the fragility of happiness and the transience of people very early, much earlier than their age. Psychology calls this existential thinking. It's when people start facing questions that most only encounter after many knocks. Who am I? Why do I exist? What really matters? But those older than their age touch these questions right when their life is just beginning. And when you carry meaning-seeking behavior, the tendency to find meaning in everything, you can't just live to exist. You have to understand, feel, and find the reason behind every choice. This makes them seem steady, profound, calm like middle-aged people, even though they're very young. But understanding life too early also brings a simmering sadness. When a young person clearly recognizes the limits of time, they can't be as carefree as others. When they're aware that everything changes quickly and nothing is guaranteed, they become cautious too soon. When they see people's dark sides clearly, they can't trust easily. Seeing life too clearly makes them live slower, deeper, and sometimes lonelier. Not because they don't want joy, but because their mind naturally turns to depths that peers haven't reached. And that difference in thinking makes them experience life like someone who's halfway through the journey, even though in reality, they've only taken the first steps. And it's precisely that premature thinking, when combined with years of prolonged sensitivity, that creates a consequence most of them experience, but rarely name correctly: early exhaustion. This isn't the ordinary fatigue anyone feels after a long day. It's a weariness rooted in childhood, when they had to carry responsibilities and emotions far too heavy before their cognitive and neural development was ready to handle them. Growing up in the mindset of always having to be strong, they enter adulthood with a level of depletion others can't see. Chronic psychological fatigue becomes their baseline state, waking up already tired, feeling heavy-hearted before doing anything, viewing life through a thick fog of emotional overload. They always feel beyond their actual age, as if their mind has traveled decades ahead of their body, and that makes blending into the carefree, vibrant, impulsive energy of peers nearly impossible. While friends excitedly dive into spontaneous plans, they only feel drained at the thought of expending more emotional energy. While others surrender to the innocence of youth, they stand outside with the sense of living in a different rhythm, slower, heavier, deeper. Psychology explains this through the concept of allostatic overload. When the nervous system operates in a state of vigilance or stress for too long, losing the ability to return to balance. When people have to grow up too soon, observe too much, endure constantly, the nervous system doesn't just tire, it rewires to adapt to high activation levels. This creates chronic emotional tension, a subtle pressure operating beneath every experience, even if on the surface they appear perfectly calm. This is why some 20-year-olds carry the mindset of 40-year-olds, not because they're pessimistic, but because they've been operating like 40-year-olds since they were 10 or 12. This exhaustion isn't just in the mind, it shows in the body: headaches, insomnia, quick fatigue, sensitivity to noise, difficulty recovering from stress. It shows in behavior, avoiding conflict, avoiding crowds, avoiding overly intense experiences. It shows in emotions, depletion, easy discouragement, easy triggering, feeling overloaded before anything even starts. And most importantly, it shows in their self-perception. They confuse exhaustion with aging. But the truth is, they're not old. They've just had to sprint through a stretch of life where others were allowed to walk. They're not out of place because they're different. They've simply had to live like adults for too long in a young body. And when someone lives in survival mode long enough, exhaustion isn't abnormal, it's inevitable. That exhaustion leads to a noticeable but hard to articulate consequence. They're no longer on the same wavelength as their peers. When the mind has to operate at an early maturity level, they naturally find themselves outside the youthful joys others can slip into effortlessly. Loud parties drain them, instead of exciting them. Light conversations leave them feeling empty, and impulsive plans make them think only of risks, rather than the thrill of youth. While friends their age chase thrills, new experiences, or fleeting pleasures, they lean toward peace, depth, things that are lasting and stable. They prefer honest conversations over small talk, stability in relationships over fleeting emotions, quiet evenings over wild nights out. It's not that they're old-fashioned, their minds are simply accustomed to spaces that require emotional safety more than noise. This difference leads to the feeling of, I'm out of sync with the group, a kind of maturity mismatch, the disconnect between biological age and psychological age. They think like 30-year-olds at 20, worry like 40-year-olds at 25, and see life through the eyes of someone seasoned, while peers are still in the exploration phase. This creates developmental dissonance, a developmental disruption, where they don't find resonance in their age group and can't fully blend with older ones either. They're caught between two worlds, too young to fully belong with true adults, but too mature to fit into carefree youth. And being stuck between those two rhythms brings a very specific kind of loneliness, not from lacking people around, but from lacking someone who truly matches their depth. Normally, mature adults might feel lonely from lacking a partner. They feel lonely from lacking someone who understands. Others feel out of place without friends. They feel out of place even sitting in the middle of a noisy group of friends. It's not arrogance or detachment. It's the natural outcome of a journey of growing up too early, too heavy, with too many emotional layers, making them enter life with a rhythm of their own that not everyone can hear. And as they start to see that misalignment clearly, a softer truth gradually emerges. The maturity in them isn't just a scar from trauma. It's also a quiet gift life gave them very early. Because while early maturity took away a lot, the innocence, the carefree spirit, the freedom to fall without fear, it also gave them abilities not every young person has. They understand others in ways few can. They observe subtle things others gloss over. They become quiet anchors in many relationships because they know how to protect, how to soothe, how to maintain peace at the right moments. Others see them as composed, only they know that composure was built from nights of having to grow up too fast. Others see them as profound, only they know that depth comes from layers of emotions they never had the chance to voice. This maturity in the end is the result of resilience, the endurance, the ability to recover, the grit to rise above one's own limits, and pain, the silent wounds that forced them to mature while still too young. But every gift has a shadow side. If early maturity brings understanding, it also takes away the chance to be a real child. They learn to think like adults while still too young, and that leaves them with a sadness that's hard to share. The sadness of those who had to understand too much with too few years lived. If early maturity sharpens their observation, it also makes them hypersensitive, easily hurt by things others don't notice. If early maturity gives them the ability to protect others, it also leaves them in perpetual loneliness. because few see the cracks behind the strength. Few understand they need protection too. But it's precisely that blend of strength and fragility that creates their rare beauty. It makes them truly human in the deepest sense of the word, a being shaped by both pain and hope, by deprivation and resilience, by what was lost and what they taught themselves to rebuild. And here's what they need to understand. Their maturity isn't a flaw. It doesn't make them abnormal, nor does it turn them into someone outside the norm. It's a very human psychological structure, very alive, very real, a natural response of the mind to years that forced them to grow faster than their age. And when you look back at the entire journey, from a childhood pushed too fast, silence becoming armor, sensitivity becoming instinct, maturity becoming duty, and loneliness becoming a long-time companion, you start to realize something you may never have allowed yourself to believe before. Feeling older than your age was never a fault. It's not something you need to fix, and certainly not something to be ashamed of or hide. It's just the trace of waking up earlier, of seeing life at layers others haven't reached yet. You're not out of rhythm, you're just moving to a different beat, one that's slower, deeper, quieter, but also more real. You're not hard to approach, you've just lived too much in too short a time. Enough to know that not every party is happiness, not every crowd is connection, not everyone can hear the tiredness in you. You're not cold, you've just learned to protect your heart after years of having to be strong too soon. And you're not quiet, you just know some things don't need explaining to be true. Let me say something no one may have ever told you, but that you need most right now. You're not old, you just matured earlier than the world expected. You're not lost, you're just different, in a very beautiful way, the way of deep souls, of people who've seen life with eyes wider than their years, of hearts that have loved, lost, learned, and stood up many times before even understanding what full youth means. And even though that maturity sometimes weighs like a burden on your shoulders, sometimes feels lonely like an empty road, sometimes tires you, as if you're living a longer life than reality, it's still a beautiful part of you, the part that makes you more understanding, kinder, more refined, and more authentic. Hold on to it, because whether gift or burden, that maturity is your unique shape in this world. If you see yourself in these words and want to continue the journey of understanding yourself more deeply, follow along so you don't miss the next pieces. And if what you've read touches you, don't hesitate to subscribe to join me in the upcoming stories of healing.